Somebody wants to sit with mommy today. You can sit with mommy, but you have to be very quiet, okay? Don't snore into the microphone. So today I want to talk to you guys about 10 things you will see in real Ireland if you are visiting there. Now, what I mean by real Ireland is a lot of people do agree that cities are cities. I am from Dublin, but I spent a lot of my time growing up in County Wicklow.
Yeah.
These days, Wicklow is definitely an extension of Dublin because people have just spread out trying to find more affordable living. But back in the day, Wicklow was a bit more rural. But not as rural as a place I visited recently, which was County Donegal. More specifically, the island of Arranmore and the little town of Ardra. Highly, highly recommend those two places if you are visiting Ireland. Now, I must specify here that you should definitely go to Dublin if you are visiting Ireland. There's a lot of things that you can see there that are very unique to Ireland, but it's a city, you know the vibe. Before we get into today's video, if you want to see more behind the scenes of my visit on that trip, you can check out patreon.com/Diane'S or channel membership. There was a load of fun on those trips. And that way you can also support the channel, but if you're not in a position to do so, do subscribe, like, and leave a comment, just anything, blah, blah, blah. Feed the algorithm. Monster. Okay, so the first thing, and I want to go with the most complicated thing first, because I don't know what direction my mouth's going to take me with this one. It's tipping respect. When I go to the United States, tipping is you have to tip. You absolutely have to tip for everything. Nearly everything. It feels like everything. Not fast food. I've been informed, not fast food. And I think most of you guys that watch from America and Canada know by now that in Europe we see tipping a little bit differently. We see it as you did a really great job, here's a tip. However, I did find that on this trip there were a couple of times where I questioned, and my friend who was with me also questioned, should we tip for this? And we kind of agreed it felt like it would have been a little bit rude. So there are things you can tip for, dinner, a big lunch, stuff like that. But a lot of times when you're visiting rural Ireland or the countryside of Ireland, people go out of their way to help you. And that's the friendliness of the towns. But tipping in a lot of those cases would be kind of rude. Almost like you're trying to big time somebody where they're just trying to do a nice thing for you. The way people like to be rewarded in Ireland is more in a general kind of way. Let me explain. So for example, when we went to this one pub that was playing trad music and people were just performing and everything, of course we had some beer and some cider, and then at one point I just wanted a concentrated juice drink. 2 o'clock in the morning takes you there sometimes. So I wanted a My Waddy, which is just like you pour it in water and like it gives you a juice drink. And the girl at the bar gave it to me and I went to pay her and she was like, no. And I was like, what? She's like, oh, you don't have to pay me for that. I was like, it's a drink. I have to pay. This is a bar. And when we were talking to them, because we went back the next day, we were telling the owner about this incident, and his point was like, no, we'd much rather you tell your friends and your family about this bar and have them come here than to pay us like €2 for a My Waddy. And then other things happened over the trip. Like, for example, we couldn't get the car to go into gear in the beginning. It was just a slightly different, I don't know, tipping... It was just a slightly different way of changing the gear than the car that my friend had been used to. And we all drive stick in Europe, it's not a big deal. But the fella that was working in the parking lot, and actually also he worked in the airport, and actually also he worked on the bags in the airport as well as hiring us the car. There was like one guy doing a lot of things. That's just like a small town thing in general. But he jumped into the car and showed us how to use it and like even drove us around a little bit the car park. It was a funny little moment. But the point is, we were like, Jesus, should we hand him like a $5 or something for helping us? But actually it just would have been kind of rude. Like, he was just helping us for the sake of helping us. Tipping him would have been just like, it would have been showboaty. It just wasn't appropriate. And loads of stuff happened like that throughout the entire trip. And the overall message was like, no, come here and buy the things that are for sale. Pay for the thing that we're charging for. So yeah, it was just an interesting note on tipping. In Dublin, it's definitely not as extreme as the States, but you would kind of throw it like a fiver here or there at somebody. Don't throw it, you know what I mean. The next thing is very overpriced crafts and handcrafts. Okay, this surprised me because since my childhood days, where a lot of things like woven linen and jars of jam and stuff like that would have actually been kind of cheap because they were, you know, made in the town and they were just like kind of priced like that. Now they're definitely charging big time prices. An example of this was there was a place that I was looking at the lovely, beautiful shawls and throws, and they were handcrafted and gorgeous, but they were like hundreds and 200s worth of stuff. And there was a picture outside that Sarah Jessica Parker had worn these clothes, so it was funny because they were just going after more like the Instagram aesthetic of it, and I guess like charging prices appropriate to that. I also bought like a jar of jam for my dad. Whiskey marmalade. Yum yum yum. And it was just a little jar and it was like €6. Like, that's not bad contextually speaking today, but I do think back in the day it would have been about £2. And not just inflation wise, like, but there are things that you won't have to pay for. Like, for example, tap water. You do not need to buy bottled water when you are in Ireland, and this is a lovely thing I love about it. You literally have the nicest tasting water from the taps and there's nothing bad in it. Also, the dairy is like so good, and you will be eating carbs. Oh my god, the carbs are so good because the dairy is so good. It all goes back to like the eggs and the milk and everything that goes into them. And it will, lads, you haven't lived till you've tasted like Irish bread, Irish scones, Irish, just anything with dairy from Ireland in it. It's good. The next thing you will see in every Irish small town or rural town is a statue of the Virgin Mary. So as many of you will know, Ireland in the past really has always been a very Catholic country, and there was that whole Catholic versus Protestant thing. We won't go into that. And these days I would say definitely the cities are not so religious at all anymore. Even the country and the rural places are not so religious, like especially the young people and stuff like that. However, a lot of the things in the countryside are still very religious, and you will just find these random statues of Mary about the place. Now, there is a whole lore that goes along with these statues of Mary, but basically they're just nice places to sit and pray, or if you're not Catholic, just have a little sit and think. But yeah, there used to be like lots of stories about these Virgin Mary statues, like seeing her crying and stuff like that. It's a whole thing. You should definitely check out if you feel like going down that rabbit hole.
I saw with my own eyes. So what? She smirked.
The next thing you will definitely see is some random thing that has been made into a tourist photo opportunity. So you'll see like some sheep that they've named Harry, and Harry the sheep is supposedly 2,000 years old, and you can take a photo with Harry the sheep. I just made up Harry the sheep, by the way. I don't know factually. There probably is a Harry the sheep, but not to my knowledge. Oh, one thing that we got pulled in by was there was this load of caves, and there were freaking caves and stones and cliffs everywhere. But this one had like a young farmer lad charging people €3 to park there and go and explore the caves. So we were like, okay, €3. So we went and we did it, and we were like, literally like, they're just caves. They're the same as the free caves we saw like 2 beaches back. Coming in the cave. I feel like I should be wearing a helmet. But yeah, it's a charming little thing, I suppose. But yeah, you will see lots of. I encourage you do those things. They're fun to do. The next thing I didn't actually know about, but my friend told me that along the drives in a lot of these places, there's signposts that show you the scenic route, so you can drive like the fastest way there or the scenic route. Now the scenic route will take you down the most bockety, tiny little country lane. You will not get your huge American car down them, but it kind of depends. Like at a certain point by like day 2, I was like, we've seen all of the beautiful things I want to see for 2 days, let's just get there. I jest, but also like a little bit true. It's very nice. Oh, another beautiful view. The next thing that you will see is people will remember you and what you order and who you are and what you like. So we found ourselves going back. Obviously we were staying in the town of Ardra, and by day 2, like, everybody kind of knew us in the town. Not everybody, that's an exaggeration, but like all the people working in the cafes and the bars, they were like, oh, here's the 2 girls that are like exploring Donegal. And like the funny thing was, when I went in for my breakfast the next day, the day before, they'd had this special on French toast, and I had tried it and loved it and told the girl that I really liked it. And when we went in the next day, she's like, oh, will you have the French toast again? And I was like, oh, yeah. Or when we returned to the airport, they were like, it's the 2 girls who couldn't get the car going. They just remember you. Like, it's so funny. It's really nice. In that same vein though, people will go out of their way to help you, especially if they think you are like tourists who are visiting their town and they want people to visit their town. It's a kind of helpfulness that you don't see so much in city life. Like in city life, people are like, I just want to get on with my shiz. I don't want to deal with this. But like, for example, we rented these bikes on the Moor Island, and they were eco bikes. They're really cool. We had such a great time.
There she goes.
But when we dropped the Mac, we told the fella that was working there, he was actually a Polish fella living in Ireland. He'd lived in Ireland like 20 years, and he'd fallen in love with this island of Moor. And we went into the little cafe on the island. There was like 1 cafe. And like 20 minutes later, he came back with this little handwritten list of all the things we had to see on our travels, like according to where we had told him we were going to visit. Like, that was just like such a sweet little thoughtful thing. And he was like, I think you girls will like this, and I think you'll enjoy that. But like, it was just full of people who wanted you to do that. And I do appreciate that's not necessarily an exclusive thing to a small town in Ireland. I have experienced that a lot when I visited the USA as well. Maybe just when you're like a native of a city, you find people less helpful. I suppose I would go out of my way if like a person who was being a tourist in my city asked me for something. The next thing you will see, and this doesn't need much explaining, but you will see rain and shine in the same hour. I can't explain this enough to people about Ireland. It's one of the things that just makes it a little frustrating there. You cannot dress for the weather or the season. They don't really exist in Ireland. Like, you will have seasons that are more likely to be sunny, like August in Ireland. You probably get a good bit of sun. Like, you'll have a burst of like good sunshiny days. It could snow in March. It could rain. It could sleet. It could be windy. You cannot plan for the weather in Ireland. It just doesn't exist. The next thing you will see is thatched roof cottages and castles. Like, the things that you see in movies, you will see in small towns in Ireland, small rural towns. And they are so nice to see, so charming. We had the option, did we want to stay in like a regular apartment or a thatched cottage? And I was initially like, oh, it would be fun to stay in a thatched cottage, but also like, we kind of felt like the novelty of that might wear off after about 20 minutes and you want your power shower and your Wi-Fi, you know. But you could stay in one, and they are freaking cool. And there are just castles everywhere, ruins of castles. This is my castle music. Ooh. Wow. You can see a castle, no problem, you'll see a castle. Some of them are like really done up, and some of them are just like wreckage. The next thing you will see is places that you can perform. Like, you can just bring your instrument in and sing or whatever. However, I will say there is a small caveat to this. Don't forget, Irish people are quite modest and humble. Like, we will slag people off if they're getting a bit too big for their britches. You don't want to be getting notions, and if you don't know what I mean by notions, well, I've mentioned it in other videos, but just basically getting a bit too big for your boots. That is like the cardinal sin of Ireland. Like, you do not want to be seen as thinking you're the bee's knees. Like, by all means, go in and play a song or 2 or 3, but don't take over and don't be showboaty. Just like, you know, keep it low key. And finally, in rural Ireland, I might be becoming an American. In rural Ireland, you will absolutely see sheep traffic jams. Like, sheep traffic jams, cow traffic jams, and nothing you can do about them will stop them from happening. If there is a sheep walking along the country lane that you happen to be driving down, too bad, so sad. You can reverse, but you can't make the sheep go faster. You're on their turf now, so literally you could be on turf. Like, that's also a thing. But yeah, I hope that was interesting for you guys. If you did enjoy it, do check out channel membership and Patreon, because I did have a really, really great trip. Did you want to shout out anyone today? Our first shout out comes from Brian Ediger. He wants to shout out first responders. He says they spend a lot of time away from their families and see a lot of stuff. Sometimes weird, sometimes tragic, sometimes both. A big thank you to them for being willing to go through all that to help the people they mostly don't know. Thank you so much, Brian. Our second shout out comes from Iceman, who wants to shout out everybody who gives care to people going through issues with their mental health. Whether it's your job or you're just supporting a friend, he says a big thank you to all of you. Thank you so much, Iceman. And our final shout out comes from Tim Donnelly to editor Diane. I'm sure she appreciates it. Tim, thank you so much, Tim. Oh, you have a lot to say for yourself today. Well, I agree with everything he said, so that's it for today. See you guys on the other side. Bye!